My name is Evelyn Brooks, and this is not the story I ever thought I'd tell. It's about a man I once loved so fiercely I thought nothing could break us. His name is Daniel Brooks. For 6 years he was my husband, my partner, my everything. For 6 years I thought love was enough. I was wrong. Because love does not survive unspoken shame. It does not survive when one person hides behind painted smiles while the other hides behind quiet resentment. Daniel wasn't just my husband. He was a circus performer, but not just any performer. He was a clown. He loved it. He loved the lights, the laughter, the children's cheers, the thrill of being someone else for a few hours each night. When he painted his face, he became Bubbles the Clown, joyful, loud, impossible to ignore. I met him before the circus back in college. He was studying performing arts. I was majoring in graphic design. Back then, he told me he wanted to make people happy. I laughed and said, "What does that even mean?" He smiled and said, "You'll see someday." I didn't know he meant literally. We fell in love fast. He was spontaneous, warm, full of life, the kind of man who bought wildflowers at gas stations and danced with me in grocery store aisles. We got married 3 years later in a small backyard ceremony. No big speeches, no fireworks, just a string of fairy lights and promises whispered between us. And in those early years, I truly believed we'd built something unbreakable. But then Daniel joined Everlight Circus. The first night I saw him perform, I sat in the front row. The crowd was loud. Children screamed with joy. Lights flashed across the arena. Then Daniel came out. He was wearing painted tears on his cheeks, a big red nose, ridiculous striped pants, and giant yellow shoes. The audience loved him. He juggled fire, told jokes, pretended to trip over props, and made kids laugh so hard they cried. I smiled, but my chest felt tight. After the show, I kissed him and said, "You were great, I meant it." But later, when I looked at his face, red paint still clinging to the corners of his mouth, I couldn't shake the discomfort. I didn't tell anyone what Daniel did for a living. Not my friends, not my parents, not my colleagues at the design agency. Whenever they asked, I'd say, "Oh, he works in entertainment." I didn't lie. But I didn't tell the whole truth either. One night, my mother asked, "What exactly does he do?" I hesitated and said, "He's part of a show." I thought she'd be proud. Instead, she raised an eyebrow and said softly, "A clown?" I nodded. She didn't say anything after that, but the silence was heavier than words. Months passed, and Daniel grew happier while I grew quieter. He'd come home excited, full of stories. The kid who hugged him after the show, the couple who asked for a selfie, the manager who promised him a promotion to lead clown next season. I smiled at the right moments. I said, "That's great, babe." Inside, I hated every second of it. I hated the paint, the ridiculous costume, the way strangers laughed at him. I hated feeling like my husband was someone I couldn't be proud of. But I didn't say it out loud. Not yet. It was my company's annual holiday party. I wore a green velvet dress. Daniel wore a crisp suit. We looked perfect, at least on the surface. Then my co-worker Lauren asked him casually, "So, what do you do?" Daniel smiled proudly and said, "I'm a clown." The table went quiet for a moment. Then someone forced a polite laugh. Someone else whispered, "That's different." My face burned. I grabbed my drink, pretending I didn't hear. That night, when we got home, Daniel asked, "Why didn't you back me up?" I said, "I didn't think it was necessary." He frowned. "It felt like you were ashamed." I didn't answer, because I was. It started small, the way cracks always do. One night, Daniel came home late after a weekend show. His makeup was half-washed. His shirt smelled like popcorn and smoke. I was sitting on the couch, laptop open, working on a client presentation. "You're still awake," he said, smiling. "I thought you'd be asleep." "I was waiting," I said flatly, not looking up. "For me?" He tilted his head, still cheerful, still soft. "For you," I echoed. And then I closed the laptop harder than I meant to. He frowned. "What's wrong?" I hesitated. "You said you'd be home by 9. It's past midnight." He sighed, rubbing his neck. "The kids wanted pictures, and the manager asked me to stay back." "I didn't think it'd bother you." I snapped before I could stop myself. "Of course it bothers me, Daniel. You spend more time making strangers laugh than being with me." The words hung in the air, heavy and sharp. His face changed. The smile faded. His jaw tightened. "That's my job, Evelyn," he said quietly. "No," I whispered, shaking my head. "That's your obsession." We didn't speak for the rest of the night. It was the first time we went to bed without touching. From then on, everything became smaller between us. Breakfast turned silent. Evenings felt heavy. Daniel started staying out later. He said the shows were running longer, but I didn't ask. I stopped waiting for him. One night, I walked into the bathroom and saw his makeup kit open on the counter. Red, blue, white, colors, smudged together on stained brushes. I stared at them and felt something break inside me. That makeup wasn't just paint anymore. It was distance. It was the reminder that he was living a life I couldn't be proud of. A life I wasn't part of. A few weeks later, my mom visited. She sat at the kitchen table sipping tea, watching Daniel rush out the door for an afternoon matinee. "Still at the circus?" she asked softly. "Yes," I said, staring at my cup. She hesitated, then said the thing I had been thinking but couldn't say out loud. "Evelyn, you deserve a man who doesn't have to hide behind paint to be himself." I wanted to defend him. I wanted to say he loves what he does, but instead I sat there in silence because I wasn't sure if I believed it anymore. 2 months later, we went out to dinner with friends from my office. I told Daniel ahead of time, "Please, don't talk about the clown thing. Just say you're a performer." He stared at me for a long time and said nothing. At dinner, when someone asked him what he did, he smiled, but not the soft, warm smile I knew. This one was sharp, bitter. "I'm a clown," he said loudly, putting down his glass. Full, face paint, big shoes, the whole thing. The table went silent. I froze, embarrassed, and muttered something about changing the topic. Later, in the car, he finally spoke. "You're ashamed of me," he said. "I'm not—" I started, but he cut me off. "You can't even say the word clown without looking like you're swallowing poison." I gripped the steering wheel tighter. "Because I didn't marry Bubbles the clown, Daniel. I married you." His voice cracked when he said, "I am both." The weeks after that were cold and quiet. We lived in the same house, but it felt like different worlds. He spent more nights at the circus. I spent more nights pretending to work late. When we did speak, it was short and sharp. "You forgot to pick up groceries." I was working. You always are. It wasn't about groceries. It was about us. Every little thing became a war zone. One evening, Daniel came home late, again. This time, his face paint was still smeared, his costume half off. I looked at him and blurted, "Do you even care about this marriage anymore?" He froze in the doorway, blinking hard. "Of course I do," he said. "Then act like it," I snapped. "Be here. Be my husband, not the circus's." He stepped closer, anger flashing in his eyes. "I make kids happy, Evelyn. I make people forget their problems for 2 hours. That's who I am." I shook my head, tears finally spilling over. "And I'm your problem, aren't I?" He didn't answer. That silence was louder than any scream. A week later, I went to see his performance. I stood at the back of the crowd, hidden in shadows. He walked onto the stage, full makeup, bright costume, big shoes, and the audience roared with laughter. I watched him juggle, fall, tell jokes, paint smiles on 100 faces. But when I looked closer, I saw the truth no one else could see. Behind the paint, his own smile didn't reach his eyes anymore. He was breaking, and so was I. The day came without warning, though deep down we both saw it coming. We were sitting at opposite ends of the couch. The TV was on, muted. Daniel still had traces of paint under his fingernails. "We can't keep doing this," I said softly. He didn't look up. "I know." The silence stretched, thick and heavy, until I finally whispered the words that broke us. "I think we should separate." Daniel closed his eyes. He didn't argue. He didn't beg. He just nodded slowly, as if the fight had already left him months ago. "You don't love me anymore," he said quietly. I reached for his hand, hesitated, and let it fall back into my lap. "I do," I whispered, "but I don't know how to live like this." We sat there for a long time, two broken people under the same roof, realizing love wasn't enough to keep us together anymore. 2 weeks later, Daniel packed his things. I made coffee. I didn't drink. He folded his costumes carefully into a suitcase, red shoes on top, makeup kit tucked in the corner. We didn't fight. We didn't scream. We didn't even cry. Not yet. At the door, he turned to me one last time. "Evelyn," he said softly, "I hope someday you'll forgive me for loving this job more than you." My throat tightened. "I hope someday you'll forgive me for not being able to love it with you." He nodded, then walked out with quiet steps. I stood at the window, and watched him drive away until the car disappeared. People think divorce is loud. It isn't. It's the opposite of loud. It's the sound of toothbrushes missing from the holder, the sound of one plate clinking instead of two, the sound of your phone staying silent at night. I moved into a smaller apartment, closer to my design studio. Redecorated, soft whites, muted grays, no circus posters, no makeup stains on the sink. It should have felt like freedom. But freedom has a strange way of feeling like loneliness when you didn't really want it. Sometimes, late at night, I'd scroll through old photos on my phone. Daniel in half makeup, holding a balloon animal. Daniel asleep on the couch, paint smudged across his cheek. Daniel making me laugh so hard I cried. I'd delete them, then restore them, then delete them again. Some wounds don't know how to heal straight. 2 years passed. Daniel moved to another city, joining Grand Arcadia Circus, a bigger, flashier company. He became their lead performer, a star. I heard about him sometimes, from mutual friends. Daniel's touring internationally now. Daniel bought a house. Daniel's in Paris. I smiled when they told me, but inside, the words twisted. I wanted to be happy for him. I also wanted him to miss me. I dated someone new for a while. It didn't last. I kept my head down, focused on work, filled my days with deadlines and late night coffee. But no matter what I built, there was always this quiet space inside me where Daniel lived, untouched and unchanged. It was 5 years after the divorce when I saw him again. I was walking through a street fair downtown, past food stalls and neon lights, when I heard children laughing loudly near a small pop-up circus, and there he was, painted face, red shoes, but I'd know him anywhere. Daniel Brooks, my ex-husband, the man I once loved more than anything. He was juggling fire, kids cheering around him, that same charisma radiating like sunlight. For a moment, it was like no time had passed, at all. Then he saw me. Our eyes locked, and his hands faltered for half a second before he caught the last torch flawlessly. The crowd roared. After the show, he walked toward me slowly, wiping paint off his face with a towel. "Evelyn," he said, softly. "Daniel," I whispered back. We stood there surrounded by noise and laughter, saying nothing for a long moment. "You look," he started, then stopped. "You look happy," I smiled faintly. "I am, most days," he nodded. "Good. That's good." We sat on a bench away from the crowd, the sound of distant drums fading under the quiet between us. "I saw your shows online," I said. "You're incredible, Daniel. Really?" He smiled softly. "I finally made it." Then, after a pause, "I just wish you could have been there to see it happen." My chest tightened, but I nodded. "I couldn't back then." "I know," he said gently. "I used to think you were ashamed of me." I swallowed hard. I wasn't ashamed of you. I was ashamed of how small I felt standing next to your dream. Daniel looked down, twisting the towel in his hands. "I wanted you to be proud," he whispered. I am, I said, tears stinging my eyes. I always was. I just didn't know how to show it. For the first time in years, I reached out and touched his hand. He didn't pull away. We didn't get back together. We didn't make promises. We didn't undo the past. We sat there until the sun dipped low, two people who had once shared everything and now shared only silence. But it was a good silence, a healed one. When we finally stood up to leave, Daniel said, "I'm glad you came today." "Me too," I said. We hugged once, carefully, like two people holding something fragile. Then we walked in opposite directions. For the first time in years, I didn't feel regret. I felt gratitude for what we had, for what we lost, and for the fact that, somehow, we both kept going. Epilogue. Painted smiles. Sometimes, I still dream about the circus. I dream of bright lights, laughter, and Daniel's face half hidden behind paint. But in those dreams, I don't feel pain anymore. I just smile, because now I know. Some love stories aren't meant to last forever. Some are meant to teach you how to let go, and some people will always carry a part of you, even if the only thing you share now is the memory of a painted smile.